Now, we have surveyed the appearances, but that is only half the battle, since we cannot interview them personally today or perform a psychoanalysis. But what we can do is look at the surrounding facts that accompany these appearances for us today and see which theory is the most plausible for them. So now it's time to fill in the gaps. First up, the expectation of the gospel to the surrounding world. The message of Jesus dying on the cross for our sins may sound loving and warm to us, but to the ancient world, a culture that thrived on honor and status, such a message would be nothing but disgusting and horrendous. Walter Baer said, "The enemies of Christianity always refer to the disgracefulness of the death of Jesus with great emphasis and malicious pleasure. A God or Son of God dying on a cross? That was enough to put paid to the new religion." David de Silva notes the same thing in his work. Christianity was founded on a premise that should have failed from the moment it began. The Christians preached to the Gentiles to worship a man that was shamefully executed on a cross. Not only that, but a Jew of all people, who the Romans looked down upon. But even more than that, a Jew who was a carpenter, which was also a position that was looked down upon. Cicero said that such an occupation was vulgar and compared it to slavery. On top of that, they preached physical resurrection to the Roman world, which was detested by most pagans, who thought the purpose of death was to escape the evil material universe and make it to the spiritual realm. Yet the Christians taught the Jewish idea that heaven would be the restoration and eternal kingdom on earth, which was not something pagans hoped for. But even more, the Christians placed ethical demands on their new converts that would have shocked most pagans. No temple prostitution or even extramarital affairs. Morality was radically challenged by the Christians that flew in the face of most pagans. As De Silva notes, the message about this Christ was incompatible with the most deeply rooted religious ideology of the Gentile world, as well as with the most recent message propagated in the Roman imperial ideology. This is seen in how the Christian opponents, like Celsus, attacked Christianity. He attacked Christians for worshiping a God who could not beat the Romans or even escape from the cross. Justin Martyr had to respond to these attacks because pagans were calling the Christians mad for putting a crucified man next to the eternal God. The Jews also thought the message of Christ was embarrassing. Their supposed Messiah was shamefully crucified and murdered by the Roman enemy. The Messiah was expected to be a conqueror who would defeat Rome and restore the kingdom of Israel. Jesus was shamed and disgraced. To follow him was to give up on the Jewish idolization of a conquering Messiah and a restored Israel. On top of that, Jesus was from Galilee and Nazareth of all places, areas which were looked down upon by the Jews. His father was not known to them, so he had a shady family history, which the Jews were not keen to forget. Everything the Christians stood for was working against them. They had better have good evidence and truly thought Jesus had been raised, because the odds were completely against them on every front. As N.T. Wright says, Christianity was born into a world where its central claim was known to be false. This being so, knowing the expectation the gospel would have, no group of conspirators would ever have made it their core doctrine. If you're going to make up a message to gain a following, you want to make up something that is appealing and will work to your advantage, not something that was expected to fail. So the conspiracy theory cannot explain why the Christians would make up such a story. Neither can the hallucination theory. As we said before, the crucifixion of Jesus is almost unanimously accepted by scholars, as well as the fact that Jesus didn't advocate light ethical loads. So unless the entire population of Jerusalem hallucinated Jesus' crucifixion and message, this would not be something the Christians were fooled into believing. Hallucinations also usually happen to grieving people as a psychological way to comfort themselves. You would not hallucinate things to believe that would cause you more trouble and grief. So the hallucination theory cannot explain why the disciples would preach an utterly embarrassing message in a way to win converts. And again, as we've already noted, the disciples in early church knew what visions were. Yet they preached a physical resurrection as part of the gospel, not a spiritual vindication. It would have been easier for their Gentile audience, and even Jewish audience, who didn't expect a resurrection to happen until the end of time, to preach a spiritual assumption over a physical return and transformation. Hallucinations would have inferred this, not a reanimation of the body. Since we know crucifixion was preached early, the mythic theory cannot explain this either. It would also have failed for the same reasons the conspiracy theory does. But all this fits perfectly with the resurrection theory. This is what was preached by Christians because this is how it happened, and they preached this embarrassing message because it was true.